Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Palestinians at the United Nations, a Hamas Mickey Mouse, and last year's forest fires all make headlines. An interfaith effort to tackle counseling, why this gymnast is performing to Hava Nagila, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. You can circle your calendars now. The vote for a Palestinian state is planned for September 20th. The controversial push for a Palestinian recognition as a state in the United Nations has been making headlines all year long, and now it appears to be moving forward at the opening of the next session at the UN. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas is set to present its request for statehood at the United Nations on that date. The United States has already said it will veto the request in the Security Council, guaranteeing that the request will not be approved in that body, which is the one empowered to make these decisions. However, the Palestinian leadership does expect to gain approval in the UN's General Assembly, which can upgrade Palestinian status from that of observer to that of a non-member state. Of course, it has long been the expectation that such a measure would fail in the Security Council and would likely pass in the General Assembly. The diplomacy of the past 9 months by both the United States and Israel has been trying to reduce the impact of this move by showing greater international solidarity, particularly in Europe. The hope has been to get more Security Council members to join the United States and to get Western nations to vote in solidarity in the General Assembly against the measure, and possibly, in showing a significant display of influence leading up to the vote, to get the Palestinians to not submit the request for recognition at all. What is becoming increasingly clear with each new step is that Israel and the United States are becoming ever more isolated in their stance. But while the U.S.-Israel alliance continues to seek more members, interesting legal developments are extending their solidarity. In the United States, the family of an American contractor killed in the Gaza Strip may be allowed to pursue a wrongful death lawsuit against the Palestinian Authority after a decision from the Fourth Circuit of the U.S. Court of Appeals this week overturned a lower court. The lawsuit alleges that the Palestinian Authority provided material support for and conspired with those who set a roadside bomb that killed American Mark Parsons and some of his colleagues in 2003. While the lawsuit had previously been dismissed in district court, this decision by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, often called the second most powerful court in the United States, sets the lawsuit on a new course, one with unpredictable potential impact for the Palestinian Authority amid its diplomatic gambits. On the other side of Palestinian governance, Hamas, which controls the Gaza Strip, gave in to strong-arm tactics from the United States regarding a U.S. charity. Hamas decided earlier this year to require charities operating in Gaza to submit to audits. The International Medical Corps, a U.S. charity, was then closed down by Hamas after refusing the audit earlier this month. The State Department last week responded by threatening to withdraw $100 million in aid. Hamas then gave in this week and allowed the charity to reopen. The reason for the standoff has to do with U.S. law and U.S. characterization of Hamas as a terrorist organization. U.S. law bars contact between U.S. nonprofits and terrorist organizations, and thus U.S. charities cannot submit to audits by Hamas without facing legal consequences at home. The Hamas auditing policy has put it in conflict with a number of countries that have charities operating in Gaza, including Norway, but now the audit policy is over, at least for U.S. charities. It's interesting, in light of the reversal of Hamas's stance, to note the original statement from a Hamas spokesperson on the issue. These organizations do not recognize and do not want to recognize the Palestinian law, he said, adding, "We do not kneel down to any threat. Any organization that wants to operate in the Palestinian territories must respect the laws." In another example of U.S. activity on issues relevant to Israel this week, the State Department has given a $200,000 grant to an organization that monitors the media of the Middle East and South Asia for anti-Semitism. The Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI, provides perspective on what kinds of messages are being communicated there about Israel and Jews. Among the revelations they've brought to us in the U.S. is the famous story from the past few years of the Hamas Mickey Mouse, teaching Palestinian children the values of killing Jews on official television. And when it comes to Israel's relationship with Hamas, conflict heated up again this week, with a Hamas rocket attack on Beersheba and the Israeli Air Force retaliating by bombing 4 targets in the Gaza Strip. 1 Palestinian was killed and at least 2 were injured, according to news reports. And while diplomatic challenges in the Israeli-Palestinian relationship of late have led many critics of the administration of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to place blame at his feet for international problems, we're seeing Netanyahu face significant domestic pressures in recent weeks. As we discussed last week, immense crowds are protesting the country's domestic economic policies, and this week there's new blame being placed on the government for a domestic tragedy. Last year's fire in the Carmel Forest led to 44 deaths amid great property damage, and now a draft report from the state comptroller cites government failures as a primary reason for the size of the fire's impact. The draft report places blame with officials at the top of Netanyahu's administration, as well as with Netanyahu himself. But when it comes to issues of safety, there's also reason for concern in the Jewish community here in the United States. As TJC's newscast has highlighted a number of stories in recent weeks about crime, violence, and abuse in ultra-Orthodox communities, some have wondered why we focused so much on them. An important reason is our conviction that, amid all the values a community can represent, a community's primary responsibility is to be safe, a safe place for children, and a safe place to gather. The Orthodox community's response to criminal activity in its midst has allowed those who endanger others to make these communities less safe. This week, we see other examples of how safety is not being achieved in these communities. The Forward this week reports on building violations in the town of New Square that local authorities say are putting residents at significant risk of death or injury. The local authorities claim they believe that 60% of buildings in the ultra-Orthodox enclave have such violations, and that they don't feel empowered to address the violations because of the political impact that the community's voting bloc represents. In another story from New Square, a 2-year-old girl was struck by a car and killed there this week. It is the third fatal car accident involving a small child in New Square in the past year and a half. Of course, the town of New Square is also facing concerns over more than accidental harm. The firebombing of a community member's home this year, allegedly because he was choosing to pray at a different location than the rest of the community, has brought significant attention from outside the community. Well, one leading member of the community, Rabbi Avram Moshe Silberman, sent out a mass mailing to members of the community in which he tries to downplay the incident, saying he has tried to gather the facts and found that the teenage boy did not intend to harm anyone, but was engaging in mischief on Lag BaOmer, a Jewish holiday traditionally celebrated with bonfires. Well, that episode of violence led the Grand Rabbi of the community to specifically order that there be no further violence against dissidents in the community. But now that order has apparently been violated. After a windshield was found smashed in the community, the rabbinical court has issued a statement calling for those with information about the incident to come forward to the rabbinical court to make a statement. Moving on to a story of different religious groups trying to work together, Christian Neen reports on an effort to get multi-faith clergy on the same page for helping others.
Last week, the conservative movement's Jewish Theological Seminary held an unusual graduation ceremony, at least by Jewish institutional standards. The school's 3-year-old Center for Pastoral Education honored the 15 members of its summer chaplaincy program with diplomas. But those students hailed from a variety of Jewish denominations and Christian faiths. The 12-week CPE program trains clergy of all faiths to work with people of all faiths through classroom training and on-site work at social service agencies such as Metropolitan Jewish Health System hospice programs and other agencies that serve the elderly. Center founder, Rabbi Michal Springer, said that the CPE program thrives on its religious diversity.
We have a Greek Orthodox woman, a Unitarian Universalist, a United Church of Christ, and other Protestant groups represented here together with Jews of all different stripes, Orthodox, Reform, Reconstructionist, and Conservative. In the fall, we actually have a clergy program where we have 5 Muslims coming, which we're very excited about.
Almost all of the students in the chaplaincy program are seminarians, hailing from the Jewish Theological Seminary, Union Theological Seminary, Yale Divinity School, Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and Hebrew College in Boston. And while other seminaries offer similar programs, JTS is the only Jewish seminary to do so, said Rabbi Springer, who got her own early chaplaincy training from Catholic nuns.
By coming to JTS, students have a Jewishly grounded program, which is new inside of the world of CPE training. And many of our Christian students who come to us are particularly interested in seeing how Judaism and Christianity come together in forming their ministerial identity.
And Rabbi Springer's Christian students said that her chaplaincy teachings transcend religious boundaries.
She embodies what it means to be a healer and a chaplain in this world through how she is in the world. It's been an absolute honor to work with her, and I feel like I am one of the luckiest Christians alive because now I have a rabbi.
The program's Jewish students said that such interfaith cooperation was part of the CPE program's appeal.
The fact that it's an interfaith program was really, really important. So to be in a chaplaincy program here at a Jewish institution, but with people from other faith backgrounds, was really meaningful. And I was able to learn a lot about their traditions and also to really deeply explore my own.
For more about the JTS Center for Pastoral Education, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. In women's news, we've recently discussed the issue of Orthodox women not allowed to remarry because their husbands won't give them a Jewish divorce document or get. Well, one woman who turned the tables by refusing the document and not allowing her husband to remarry has received a significant fine. According to news reports, the married couple in question has been separated since 2003, and a family court judge in Israel has fined her more than $7,000 for each year that she's refused a divorce after a rabbinical court ordered her to allow it. The total fine is nearly $57,000. The judge has said that if the wife doesn't now allow the divorce, she could face further penalties. Here in the United States, an Orthodox woman is breaking new ground for Orthodox women by becoming the first female doctor of Talmud studies to graduate from the Orthodox Yeshiva University. Talmud study for women is still a controversial subject for many in the Orthodox world. And in a story of athletic accomplishments, one of the top United States gymnasts is using the traditional Jewish song of Hava Nagila to accelerate her success. Alexandra Raisman was a member of the silver medal-winning U.S. team at last year's World Championships. At the CoverGirl Classic that was recently concluded, her floor exercise was done to the tune of Hava Nagila, much to the amusement of the crowd and the announcers.
She says she loves the music. People can clap to it. And it also, she says, it energizes her. I can see why.
I always preferred music that got the crowd going with me as well, just in case you need a little extra help. So far, she doesn't need any help.
As you can see here, the crowd did enjoy the music, clapping along to the performance, and the Jewish mood set by the music even got the announcer in a Yiddish mode of mind.
I forgot to do that. Yeah, that's what happened.
So new, she forgot something.
Here's hoping for a week in which you don't forget something. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 291, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and now on Comcast Cable in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.